So first of all, Baruch Hashem, it is an honor to be back in Lakewood, speaking to this Chashava Olam. And you don't realize, or maybe you do because you live in Lakewood, but you don't realize how far it is. So in the 3 hours I just spent coming from the 5 towns, I had an opportunity to rethink about 4 or 5 different times what it is I'm going to speak about tonight. So this is like the 5th version, the 5th draft already. Because the topic tonight is Amuna and anxiety. Oh, we have a cup? It's like what they brought me. It's like a soup bowl. Like, what? No, it'll work. Yeah, it'll work. Yeah, sure. It's like a soup bowl. Look at this. I'm going to try. I want to make a bracha, though, at least. Okay, that's probably the last that I'm going to use that big giant cup tonight. Okay. So we're going to talk about Emuna and anxiety. And it's wonderful to be introed the way that I was just introed, to find out that the shir that I gave in Shara Bitachon was being used for somebody else to give a shir, and that, I'm correct, you just made a siyum in the entire Shara Bitachon of Chavis Levavis, which is an incredible thing. And that's, to me, if you want to know the most gratifying thing for me personally, is teaching so that other people can teach. That's, to me, the greatest expenditure of energy and time, is investing in something that's going to be amplified, because whoever it is who receives it is going to go and take it and spread it to others. So the fact that I recorded a shir in Shara Bitachon, and you took that shir and you used it as the basis to give a shir here in Lakewood, and you finished Shara Bitachon and made a siyum, that's like the greatest news. You made my day. Now, having said that, I want to let everybody know something. I'm very, very serious about this. This is really my passion in life. So I want you to know, for full transparency, that I do expect, completely sincerely, honestly, I do expect that everybody sitting here will also try to take what they learned tonight and teach it to others. Because really, the impact of an evening like this is not just the couple of hundred K'nai Harak and Yirbo people who are sitting in this room, but the thousands of people, Amir Hashem, who will be affected when each of you goes out and acts as a mashpia to influence others for the good. So please try to at least listen for one nugget, one idea that you can internalize and make your own and share with others. All right, so let's talk about Emuna and anxiety. They're sort of opposites, because, you got that. That was the point, that the more Emuna, the less anxiety. But the truth is, it's not 100% accurate. It was a title, titles, you have to be short and sweet, and I think also the alliteration, Amuna, anxiety, that sounds good. But really, technically speaking, if we're talking about the antidote to anxiety, or the opposite of anxiety, we're not so much speaking about Emuna as much as we're speaking about Bitachon. And I want to explain the simple difference between the two, how they're different, but also how they are related to each other, because obviously they're very closely connected. There's a mashal from the Ramban, who wrote a kuntras on Amuna and Bitachon, and he explains it very, very simply. He says, Emuna and Bitachon is like a tree and its fruits. Not all trees have fruits, but all fruits have to come from a tree. So what does this mean? Not all Amuna leads to Bitachon, but all Bitachon comes from Amuna. Let's break it down further. Emuna is belief. I believe. But belief can remain intellectual. It can remain an idea. When we take that belief and we bring it down into our heart, and that process is called V'yadaita hayom v'shavesa levavecha, you should know today, and you should place it upon your heart. So there's two things. There's the knowing and there's the emotional integration. So when you bring it down from belief, from the abstract, from the idea to the feeling, and maybe even deeper than just being an emotion, it can even be a sensation, something physical, something sensorial, something in your body, literally a feeling of, I can breathe. That's called Bitachon. So it's like the trees and the fruits. A person can be a tree. He can have Amuna. He can believe in Hashem. Hashem created the world. But he's not feeling it. And he's not living the way you would live if you really, really felt that Hashem is the balabas and is directing every detail of our life. So he has the tree, but he doesn't have the fruits. At the same time, however, although not all trees have fruits, all fruits have to come from trees. So if you see someone who's got the fruits, meaning somebody who has what the Shara Bitachon, what the Rabbeinu Bechaya calls the menuchas hanefesh, that comes from Bitachon. He has that state of tranquility, that state of serenity. So that has to have originated in Amuna. The Bitachon is the Even HaBoichen. It's the litmus test. It's the proof is in the pudding. But where did it come from? Originally, it came from Amuna. So we need both. We need both. So we're going to talk about both of them tonight. We're going to talk about the Amuna and we're going to talk about the Bitachon. So what is the Amuna? Yeah, we know there is a God. Hashem exists. But it's much more than that. It's understanding the personal Hashem. It's understanding that my life and every detail in it is communication from Hashem. It's understanding that everything that happens to me, even the painful moments, especially the painful moments, have purpose and are by design. And I would never be put through anything that wasn't necessary. And that ultimately there's a plan. And it's not just for the good of the greater picture, but it's for the good of each individual. This is the Amuna. Internalizing it so that we feel at peace with the details and the facts of our lives, that's the Bitachon. So I mentioned earlier there's this idea of Yadaita Hayem being the intellectual phase and Veshavesa Levavecha being the emotional integration. So obviously that's a pasuk from Chumash, but also it's the opening of not Shara Bitachon, but Shara Yichud ve'Amuna, which is the second chelik of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe wrote a Tanya, the first chelik of Tanya, the 53 chapters, Likutei Amarim, are very famous as a guidebook, a manual for, you mentioned you also learned my Tanya Shir. Okay, very good. And it's a guidebook, or it's a manual for navigating the conflict between the two souls, the Nefesh Olakish, the Nefesh Bamis, the godly soul, the animal soul. That's the first volume of Tanya. But then there's a second volume called Shara Yichud Ve'Amuna, the gate of oneness and faith. And it starts with this pasuk. Ki Hashem hu Elokim. That Hashem, Yud Ke Vav Ke, is Haya Haya V'Yeh. Hashem as He is, was, will be, meaning transcendent of time and space, supernatural, miraculous, eternal. And that is identical with Elokim B'Gematria HaTeva, which means nature, which means the predictability of this world. And it's really all one, and therefore, even this world that we see, Olam, Meloshin Helam, you know what a world is? A world is an Olam. Olam is from the word Helam. So the world is a concealment. A concealment of what? Of the truth that really the creation is only a lavush, it's only a garment within which we can have a relationship with Creator. Olam is set up that we see creation as if, chas v'sholom, it's independent, as if it operates on its own, as if it's random. But the reality is that the creation itself is an expression of Creator. So we have to see through the helam of Olam, and we have to realize that Havaya is Elokim, that even in the predictability of nature, it's all miracles, it's all godliness. Hashem is running the show. Okay, but again, this is the beginning of Shara Yichud V'Amuna. The process is the Yadaita, the knowing, and then there's V'Shaves V'Levavecha, putting it on your heart, internalizing it emotionally. So I'll tell you a story where I really finally grasped what this process looks like. And since the time that this story happened, I've been able to use this to communicate the idea to many, many crowds all over the world. But I have to start with the whole background. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how long ago this story is, because in the story, my son, who got married last year, was 8 years old. So this story is, I don't know, maybe 13 years ago. I was writing a translation in English of Shara Yichud Ve'Amuna. And it was taking me forever, like years. It was literally taking me years. And I needed to turn it into the publisher. So my son, I think he was 8 years old at the time, was going to a special camp, a winter camp. It's called the Tzirei HaShluchim winter camp. And what it is, it's children of Shluchim, emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. By the way, the Kinnis HaShluchim is this week in Crown Heights. And they have a camp. Most of these kids are growing up in far-flung areas and remote areas. They don't have a cheder to go to. They don't have friends. And once a year, they have this winter camp where they can get together. And so my son was enrolled in this camp. And the camp at that time was in Oracle, Arizona. Where is Oracle, Arizona? It's like in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, really. Hours from the airport. So my wife said to me, our son is going to camp in Arizona. See if the camp director will let you go with him and go on a writer's retreat, and you'll be in the middle of the desert, and you'll finish the translation of Shara Yichud Ve'Amuna. So I said, that's not a bad idea. So I asked the camp director if they would allow me to bring my son there and stay there for the 10 days. And they said yes. And I said, but I just want to make it clear what I'm asking from you. I'm asking a big favor. I'm not there to speak. I'm not there to do anything else. I'm just there to focus on translating this very dense book of mystical concepts, and I need to really focus completely. They said, that's fine. No one's going to bother you. And they didn't bother me. And it was amazing. I was writing in the desert, and in 10 days, I was able to finish the entire project. I finished probably in 10 days what it would take me 6 months at home to write. And on the last day, I was so relieved, and I said out loud, wow, it's amazing. Baruch Hashem, I'm so glad to be done. And the camp director heard me say that. He said, oh, you're done. Would you speak to the kids? So I said, I'm not really a kid guy. I'm not like camp counselor type. They said, it's okay. First of all, it's like the end of camp. So, it doesn't have to be that great. I said to them, listen, I've been spending the past 10 days totally immersed in Sha'ar Yichud ve'Amuna. On a regular day, I'm not like the guy you want to bring up to speak to a bunch of children. But right now, my brain is totally into this Sha'ar Yichud ve'Amuna thing. That's fine, you could talk about that. So the guy, he really didn't care, obviously, or he was really desperate. So he puts me up there, and there's a room full of kids, 8, 9, 10, 11, I think 12 years old is the oldest in that group. And these are all kids growing up on shlichus from far-flung, remote areas, most of them. So I get up there and I tell them, you should know today, you should place it upon your heart. And I'm trying to think, how do you say this in children's language? So I realized as I'm standing up there, I said to them, if your 5-year-old brother or sister asked you, remember the youngest ones there are 8. If your 5-year-old brother or sister asked you, where is Hashem? What would you tell them? And they all shouted out, everywhere, right? Hashem is here, Hashem is there. Hashem is truly everywhere. Up, up, down, down, right, left, all around here, there, everywhere. That's where he can be found. It's a song. Well, to me, that was basically in kids' talk, the concept of Havaya is Elokim, B'Shamayim Mimal, V'al it's Mitochas, the whole idea of it's really all Ein Oid, there's nothing else, it's all Elokus, but how do you say that as a child? Hashem is everywhere. That's how I translated it. Okay. So I said to them, excellent. You all said the right answer. That's right. Hashem is everywhere. Now, here's another question. And I knew this was going to be a challenging question. Wasn't sure how challenging, but I knew this would be the challenging part. I knew that the original question, what would you tell your 5-year-old brother or sister if they asked you where is Hashem? I knew that would not be a challenging question, but I knew this would be a challenging question. I said to them the follow-up question, which was, how does that make you feel? They didn't have an answer. How does it make you feel? It's a thing that you know, right? It's something that you know. And what am I trying to do with them? I'm trying to get them to feel it. So I explained to them, I said, it's okay that you don't have a feeling about this piece of information, because you don't automatically have a feeling about something just by knowing it. In order to have a feeling about something, you have to actually go through a process. I said to them, I'll give you an example. And again, I wanted to give them an example they could relate to. So as I told you, these are little children of shluchim, and most of them are growing up in far-flung areas. I told you they don't have a cheder to go to. They also don't have kosher restaurants. These are kids. All they eat is whatever their mother cooks. They don't have the experience of going out to the pizza shop. That doesn't exist. Except maybe once, maybe twice a year, they'll take a family trip and they'll go to Brooklyn. And that's like, for them, the highlight is they actually have food options, right? So I say to them, imagine your family's in Brooklyn and you want to order dinner, or you're going to go out for dinner, and you have to agree. So it has to either be milchiks or fleishiks. It's going to either be pizza or Chinese food. And so all of a sudden, your older sister, your teenage sister starts running like a city council meeting, and she's taking votes and polling everybody, pizza or Chinese, pizza, right? And you got to vote now. The pressure's on. You got to say which one you want, right? And they come to you, which one do you want? We're voting, pizza or Chinese? And you say, give me a minute. Why do you need a minute? I ask these kids, why do you ask for a minute? Like, you don't know what you want? You need a minute to figure out what you want? Actually, no, you don't need a minute to figure out what you want, because if you wanted it, you wouldn't need a minute to figure it out. You would know it already. And yet you do need the minute. So what's the minute for if it's not to figure out what you want? The minute is not to figure out what you want. The minute is in order to want. There's a difference. So you know what pizza is. You know what it is. You've known what it is for years. If I would ask you to draw a picture of it, describe it, you know what it is. Up here. You know what Chinese food is. Same thing. You could picture it, you could describe it. Up here. But emotionally, you're not really feeling anything about either of them right now. So you say, give me a minute. And in that minute, what do? You think. You think about the pizza. You think about the Chinese food. And after a minute of thinking, it's not just ideas anymore. It becomes a feeling. At which point you turn to your sister and you say, I feel like pizza. See, a minute ago you knew pizza. Now you feel like pizza. And in that minute, you were able to take something that was up here and you were able to put it down here. So I told him, there's an official name for that, by the way. It's called hisbonenus. Hisbonenus, we could translate it as meditation, but they wouldn't know what that word meant, so I just told them it means thinking about something deeply, which is what it is. Since you're adults, I'll tell you even more. Hisbonenus is from the root bina. Bina is a type of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. There's chokhmah and there's bina. Chokhmah is the father, bina is the mother. So chokhmah is the original information. Bina, also related to the word boine, to build. It's like the mother within whose womb the baby grows. You take an idea and you think about it and you expand it and you bring out the details. That's called bina. That's called the mother. It's actually a feminine way of thinking. That's why Chazal tell us that bina yesera nitna leisha. Women were given an extra measure of bina. Chokhmah and bina is the original idea, that's the chokhmah, and then what you turn it into, how you develop it through metaphor and association and storytelling and descriptions. That's the feminine style of thing. That's why, by the way, I hope this is okay to say this is just my personal observation, but like as an educator, the difference between learning with a group of men and learning with a group of women is that if you try to get men to respond to something, you say to them, okay, that's the concept. Who could relate to that in their personal life? Do you know what it's like? Well, you know, if you're married, you probably know what that would be like, right? When you ask a man, could you relate to that and give me a personal story? You don't get anything. But you have a group of women and you say, well, you don't even have to say, actually, because they're, Rabbi, hold. I have a personal experience I want to share, right? Go ahead. And then you have to be careful because once the women start, see, that's the beauty of Bina, it's elaborative thought. It's stream of consciousness thought. So you can build one association to another association to another association to another association, and it literally can go on infinitely. Until finally you say, let's bring it back to the original point, which means the Nekudas HaChochma. It's called a point of Chochma. It's literally called a point. It's like a little dot. The Chochma is just a little dot. The Bina is again, it's like the womb of the mother that turns the baby into a human being. So his Beinanus is this place we go into in our mind where we take an idea, a little idea, and we think about it elaboratively through giving different illustrations or examples or relating to it in different personal experiences. One concept. And we try to look at it from different angles. So that's what his Beinanus is. So I say to these kids, you know that Hashem is everywhere, but you don't feel anything about it. So what are we going to have to do? And they all knew the answer. They said, we're going to have to think. I said, how long are you going to have to think about it? And they also knew that because I had set it up. They said, a minute? I said, yeah, it only takes a minute. Now, obviously, the more his Beinanus you do, the longer you think about it, then the more associations you'll build, which means the more deeply the emotional integration will take hold. So the more you do, the more firmly you'll connect to the concept. But yeah, even a minute. I mean, you all understand the power of your brain to create emotion, right? I mean, think about being up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m, all of a sudden your mind just somehow ends up on some thought, some worrisome thought. And then what do? You start to meditate on that thought. I mean, that's what worrying is. Worrying is you take one idea and you think about it over and over, you cogitate, you turn it in your brain until all of a sudden it becomes an emotion. It's not just an idea anymore. Now you're feeling it. And even deeper than an emotion, it can actually become a physical sensation. Like literally, you're lying in bed and you're sweating and your stomach is cold and nothing's actually happening except for the fact that you're meditating. Your brain is that powerful. Or, that's thinking about the future. You could also do it about the past. You can get a resentment. You can think about some hurt that you experienced. It could have been years ago. Could have taken place miles away from here. It's over. And yet you revisit it. I call it visiting the museum. You go to the museum. It's the worst museum. It doesn't even have a gift shop. But it's the museum of your suffering, right? And you're the curator and you're the only visitor. And you revisit your suffering and you re-experience it. And what happens? This one memory up here, it's just one memory, but you think about it, that his Beinanus is powerful and it grows, the emotion grows. And it becomes more and more vivid and more real than when it happened in the first place. Right? So that's the power of the mind to create these emotions. We all do it. I mean, we do it without thinking, without trying to do it, whether we're worrying or we're falling into resentment. But the point is, just like you can accidentally do it and sabotage yourself, you can purposely do it and uplift yourself. So I tell these kids, still telling this story about the kids. So I tell these kids, I tell these kids, we're going to think about Hashem is everywhere for how long? 1 minute. Do you know how long a minute is? You think a minute is not a long time. A minute is a very long time. It's such a long time that when I first started sharing this technique with groups, I would actually invite them to think for a minute. And then I realized that it was too risky because most people can't do it. They get distracted, or I should say more accurately, they distract themselves. And I think the reason is, one big reason is because we don't know what to do when we get, when we have foreign thoughts, when we get the thought that pops up that not the thing that we were trying to think about, and we don't know how to handle that, and that's uncomfortable, or maybe we feel like a failure, or whatever the case may be, and then we just kind of forget the whole thing. But the reality is, when you're doing hisbaininus, I mean, look, if you were doing the pizza and Chinese food meditation, and all of a sudden you started thinking about something else, I don't think you would get too intense about it. You would just know to ignore it, right? You wouldn't take it too seriously. You would just, oh, well, that's, all of a sudden I'm thinking about birds, but I don't want to think about birds right now. You would just let that move past you, and you go back to think about pizza and Chinese food. But for some reason, when we're thinking about serious things, we take it really to heart. We get all nervous. Oh no, I got distracted. And really, the skill is just ignore it. Don't engage it, and just get back to the thing you were supposed to be thinking about. So at any rate, yeah, I found that it's very risky with adults to do it for a minute. But with these kids, they did it. And we had a timer, we had a watch, and I told them to think for 1 minute. And at the end of the minute, I said, you just thought about Hashem is everywhere for a minute. I want to know how you feel. So the first kid who raises his hand sitting in the very front, off like in the left side, that was just the first kid who raised his hand. So I called him, go ahead. He said, I remember these kids were all 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. He said, I felt calm. I'm like, wow, that's beautiful. Okay, who else? I figure I'll call on maybe 2, 3 kids and be done with it. The next kid is the kid sitting right next to him. So I said, go ahead. He says, I felt happy. Wow, that's beautiful, happy. What happened is, I guess they thought that I was going to go one by one, and every kid gets to say his answer, which was not my plan because there was like 100 kids in the room. But that's what happened. And I want to tell you something. I would never have done that on purpose, but it was beautiful. One by one, these kids, I felt calm, I felt happy, I felt strong, I felt relaxed, I felt safe. I'm like, this is so beautiful. And I'm thinking to myself, you have a room full of these kids with these feelings, calm and happy and safe and strong and secure. If you can take those feelings and bottle it and sell it to the pharmaceutical industry, you could be a billionaire. You could be a trillionaire. Literally. And yet the biggest joke of it is, you don't need to sell this to the pharmaceutical industry. You don't have to buy it from the pharmaceutical industry, because literally this is something that everyone can produce in their own head, including a little child, for free, in a minute. So you know that you're able to use that amazing, powerful computer to create emotions, because you all know how to worry, and you all know how to cringe out on some terrible, shameful memory. And you all know how to get a resentment and to feel that indignant anger. We all know how to meditate ourselves into those intense emotional states. We do it all the time. The only thing we're missing is take a minute and be misboinen about Hashem. And it'll start to create emotions. And you don't have to be an expert. You just start. So this was a life-changing experience for me after I had this experience with these kids, because I realized that Amuna and Bitachon, idea and emotion, theory and practice, this can be achieved really virtually by anyone who's willing to just think for a minute. You don't have to be some scholar. You don't have to be some mystic. Anyone who's capable and willing of thinking can produce real emotions for Hashem. And then you have the tranquility, the serenity, the peace of mind to live life, not just with the Amuna, with the conceptual belief, but with the real emotional and even visceral and sensorial sense of peace that we receive from truly feeling that Hashem is conducting our lives. The Baal Shem Tov says on the Pasuk, Shavisi Havaya Lenegdi Samid, he says, Shavisi Meloshin Shaveh. So Shaveh means equal. Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Samid means I have placed Hashem before me at all times. Pasuk in Tehillim. What does it mean I've placed Hashem before me at all times? It means I have a sign that says Hashem on it in front of me. I've placed Hashem before me at all times. It means I think about Hashem. I'm thinking about Hashem. The Baal Shem Tov explains Shavisi Meloshin Shaveh, equal, and proceeds to explain what that means, that if Taka Shavisi Havaya Lenegdi Samid, if you are thinking about Hashem, then what's going to happen? Shaveh, you will achieve equilibrium. You will be emotionally stable, even keel. As opposed to what? The roller coaster of reactivity. So let's put it in simple terms. Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Samid, I'm thinking about Hashem. That means that I'm God conscious. Put it in simple English. But if I'm not proactively, purposefully thinking about Hashem and putting Hashem first, then the default is I'm not going to be God conscious. I'm going to be self-conscious. We got this from Adam and Chava. When they ate from the Eitz Hadas, they became self-conscious. That was the first thing that happened to them, and then they experienced shame. So the default mode of humanity is self-consciousness, crippling self-consciousness. And when you are self-conscious, then what happens? You are hyper-aware of all the ways in which life is treating you. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it what I like? Is it not what I like? You become focused on what you're getting. When you're self-conscious, you're focused on how you are being treated by life or how you feel that you're being treated by life. And therefore, you become a victim inherently, automatically, because now your emotional state is tied to things that you cannot control. Right? Because whatever way that life is treating me, which I cannot control, that's the way I'm going to have to end up feeling. Right? Hakol bidei shamayim chutz meyiras shamayim, like the Gemara says. Everything's in the hands of heaven except for one's awe of heaven. So I can control my awe of heaven, which means my emotional state. But I cannot control anything outside of me, people, places, and things. What happens if I am tying my emotional state to the things outside of me that I cannot control, to the people, places, and things? So then I go on that emotional roller coaster, and I have no say in the matter. As opposed to what? Instead of being self-conscious, I'm God-conscious. Self-conscious is I'm thinking about all the ways that I feel that life is treating me, and I'm making a decision whether I like it or I don't like it, or turn up the heat or turn down the heat or fluff my pillow. Or God-conscious, I'm not thinking anymore about how I'm being treated. I'm not thinking about how life is treating me. I'm thinking about service. I'm thinking about usefulness. I'm thinking about what I am giving to this world in which Hashem put me. How am I serving Hashem right now? And now I have power. Because Hakol b'yedei Shamayim, chutz mi'yireh Shamayim, I have no control over the way life treats me, but I have perfect control over how much of an Oved Hashem I want to be at this moment. And no one can ever take that away from me. I can always choose to be useful to my Maker at any given moment. And if my emotional state is tied to that, now I'm locked in. I'm locked in. There's no more up and down. There's no more emotional roller coaster. It's the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. You know the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? Some people are like thermometers, some people are like thermostats.
There's someone that spoke about it.
Huh?
Someone spoke about that at the beginning.
Oh, so I'll skip it.
My point is, she said how it changed her life. And
Oh, that I said it?
she shared it with all of us. And
Oh, I missed that. What did I miss?
she said that it changed her life.
Where? Who? You spoke with thermometer and thermostat?
I wrote a small little letter for you, and there was a few minutes of quiet, so I shared the letter.
So you said the whole thing?
I paraphrased.
You paraphrased it? It was 2 years ago. So I'll say the one-liner. Say the whole thing? It's very simple. A thermometer and a thermostat, they both have to do with the temperature, right? Okay. But the difference is like this. The thermometer tells you the temperature in the room. The thermostat tells the room the temperature. So if we have a thermometer relationship with our own emotions, that means the self-consciousness of being totally reactive, putting ourselves into a victim role, where we only get to be happy if we like how life is treating us. And if we experience hardship, then we have no choice but to be sad. If we're in the thermostat mentality, then yes, we may also experience hardship, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be sad. I'll tell you a story. There was a chassid at a Mendel Futterfass. And did you tell this also, the story of Mendel? But you remember the story of Mendel. In the Gulag, you remember the story? I'll refresh your memory. So the Mendel Futterfass was a chassid. He was sent to a Gulag, to a work camp in Soviet Russia. And there was a professor there. See, in the Soviet gulags, there were all types of people. Some of them were like Reb Mendel, like political prisoners, dissidents. Some of them were intellectuals, because the communists were very suspicious of people who knew how to think for themselves. And a lot of them, or maybe most of them, were just common criminals. So this professor says to Reb Mendel, he says, I'm observing a very strange phenomenon. I see young, healthy men who, in the morning when they tell us to get up for our day of labor, slave labor, they would chop wood. They say they're not feeling well and they can't get up. And then at the end of the day, when we come back at dark, they're dead in their cot. These are young, healthy men. And I realized it's because they've given up on life, and then they physically languish. He says, I'm watching you, and I see that you have this certain zest for living, and that you actually, of everyone here, you're full of the most energy. Like you're the most robust, you're the healthiest. And I'm trying to like create a theory to explain the difference. So Reb Mendel says to this professor, it's very interesting, by the way, because if you know anything about Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, it's uncannily similar to that whole approach. And I'm not sure if Man's Search for Meaning would have been available in the Soviet Union at the time when this story happened, or if it was a case of parallel thinking that this professor sort of arrived at this observation on his own, or if he was inspired by Frankl. But either way, Mendel says to the professor, he says, well, let me explain something to you. These guys that you see dying, these are Cossacks. And what's a Cossack? Cossack is these are not classy people. He says, for a Cossack, life is three things: a horse, a rifle, and a bottle of vodka. That's life. Now, when they get sent here, they lose those three things. They lose their horse, they lose their rifle, they lose their bottle of vodka. And if those three things are life, and those three things are taken, so basically life was taken from them, it's only a matter of time before the body gets the memo from the mind and they drop dead. He says, but I want to explain to you something about me, about my life. My life is not that different here than it was at home. What does it mean? It's not that he's a slave in a labor camp. They're pointing guns at him. He's chopping wood all day. And he's saying my life is not so different here than it was back at home. But he proceeds to explain. He says, listen, back at home, I had an office. And I would work in my office. And when it would start to get dark, you get up from your desk and you go to shul and you daven mincha. He says, okay, so here it's very similar. It's not a desk, it's the middle of the forest. I can't actually stop working or they'll shoot me. But as the sun starts to set, I daven mincha. Now, there's no minyan, there's no shul. I can't actually say the words out loud because they'll shoot me, but I'm davening mincha in my head as I'm chopping wood. And in fact, not only is life not that different, if anything, in some ways, it's better. Because when I was back home and I would daven mincha, I'm in a shul full of people, they're also davening mincha. And this is a shul where every day people daven mincha. And for years they've been davening mincha. When I'm out chopping wood, I think to myself, as I'm davening mincha, I bet you in all of the years since Hashem created the world, nobody has yet stood on this exact spot and said Hashem's praises. So in that way, my life is maybe even a little better. This is the difference between God conscious and self-conscious. God conscious means my quality of life is determined by my ability to serve. And I can always serve because there's no situation Hashem puts me in that I cannot be of service. And even the hardships, and especially the hardships, are opportunities for service. The self-conscious model is my quality of life is totally linked to how I'm being treated. Do I feel like life is pleasant? Do I feel like it's easy? Is it comfortable? You know, it's bad enough that I'm going through difficulties, but then if I'm emotionally tied to that, now I'm going through difficulties and I'm sad. You're going to say, of course you're sad. You're going through difficulties. Stop that. You're thinking like a thermometer. You don't have to be a thermometer. You can be a thermostat. You do not have to link those two. You can be going through hardships and not experience sadness. Pain is not sadness, and pleasure is not joy. They're two different things. There's a saying that pain is unavoidable, suffering is optional. Or some people even say pain is unavoidable, suffering is self-inflicted. What's the difference between pain and suffering? Pain is something I cannot control. there's no free choice. There's no bechira chofshis. Whether it's physical pain or it's an emotional pain, there's certain stimuli that hurt. And there's nothing I can do about it. And it happens in an instant. That's pain. So imagine you get up in the middle of the night and you're walking across the carpeted floor. You'll see in a minute why, for the purposes of the story, the floor has carpet. And your kids were playing during the day, and they were playing Lego. You know where I'm headed. Some of you are wincing already. Your kids were playing Lego, and you told them to clean up, and they didn't clean up. It's the middle of the night, and you're half asleep, and in your socks, you step on a Lego in the carpet, and you say, ow. That's pain. A second later, you say, why do things like this always happen to me? That's the suffering. See, the pain, you can't do anything to stop the pain. Once you step on that Lego, that's it. Surrender, because you have to just go through it. There's no way to stop it. But the suffering was totally optional. You know why? Because the pain does not require a thought, a conscious thought. The pain is just sensorial. And the same thing, by the way, with emotional pain. If somebody you love, let's say, betrays you or says something cruel to you, that immediate shock that you feel, the physical shock, that's pain. You cannot control that. You didn't have to think about it in order to feel anything from it. It's an immediate response. But a second after that, when you do go to your brain and you start to think about it and tell yourself a story, particularly a victim story, and you start to say, why do terrible things always happen to me? And then you do the hisbaininus, the bina, the building, and you start laying into it. And the tragedy here, the irony of it, I work to pay for those Legos. The very Lego that now, and I slaved to make dinner. I served food to those children, and I bought them the Legos. And I'm only up in the middle of the night because I'm making their lunches. I'm packing their lunches. The irony, the tragedy. So now what you're doing is you're expanding the original pain. That's the suffering. You do not have to go to your brain and start telling yourself an elaborate story about your pain. I'm not telling you that you won't feel pain. Pain is part of life. What I'm telling you is that you have the option of not going to your brain and meditating on it in a way that will actually create greater, intense emotions about that pain. So pain is not sadness. I've never had the personal experience, but anyone who's ever given birth will tell you that. It's not sadness. When you're accomplishing something, when there's a purpose, yeah, it may be painful, but it's not sad. Conversely, I told you pain is not sadness. Pleasure is not joy. We make that mistake too. We think pleasure is joy. Pleasure is not joy. There is no amount of pleasure that you can ever amass that will ever equal one iota of joy. We think it will. When you're standing in the refrigerator at 3 a.m. after you stepped on the Lego and you're comforting yourself and you see that there's cheesecake left over from Shabbos, and you say, how much of this cheesecake will it take to be happy? And first piece didn't do it. Tasted good. It was pleasure. You got pleasure. I'm still not happy though. Maybe the happiness is in the second piece. You eat a second piece of cheesecake. And a third piece. You can eat cheesecake all day. You're going to have pleasure until finally you'll make yourself sick and then you don't even have the pleasure anymore either. But you'll never have joy from it. And in fact, not only does pleasure not equate joy, but as human beings, we can even be in the midst of experiencing profound pleasure and not only not feel joy, but be very, very, very sad. And that's one of the most tragic things, is that when we think that something will bring us joy and we indulge in it, and then we come up completely empty and degraded. And not only is it disappointing, it's humiliating. But we have to know, pleasure is not joy. You know why? Because I cannot receive joy. I wasn't built really to be a thermometer. I wasn't built to be reactive. I'm not an animal. I was built to be of service. My joy comes from how useful I am, not what I get out of life, but what I put into it. And that's precisely why I can be in the midst of a painful experience and have joy. And in fact, in some ways, not that we want this to be the norm, but there are times in our lives when we are experiencing serious pain, even prolonged pain from a real Nisayan, and yet our ability to be of service and to be useful in spite of the pain, or sometimes even because of the pain, when we figure out how to use it to help others, to be an impetus to growth. So then we're in the midst of pain and we're experiencing joy. Because again, my emotional state is all based on how I think. B'simcha oisias machshava. My thinking creates my emotions. Now, pain and pleasure, that's the body. And there's no bechira chofshis. So stepping on a Lego is pain and eating a cheesecake is pleasure. But being happy, that is completely something that I can control. And the way that I control it is by going to this amazing machine and thinking for even a minute. Takes just a minute. Now, how are we doing so far? Following? You expected something a little different, or this is? Different people know me from different contexts. So sometimes they experience a little like bait and switch, and they're like, this is not what I was expecting. If you're okay with this, I just want to talk about another concept connected to Amuna and anxiety. A very important concept. Actually, it's two concepts, but they come together. In Mishlei, Shlomo Melech, he speaks about anxiety. He refers to it as daiga. And he says, Doga balev ish yashchena. Yashchena literally means smush it down. Now, you know there's no nekudas in Tanakh, and that's because Torah, very good example of Chochmah and Bina, by the way. Torah shebechsav is Chochmah, and Torah shebal peh is Bina. So you can have one word in Torah shebechsav, and the Torah shebal peh, which is the feminine Torah, Torah simecha, will come and be boina, will build, will flesh it out, and bring out different meanings from that one word. So, in this particular case, we have a Gemara in Yuma where we have a machlekes Amarayim regarding how to read this word, what you're supposed to do with the daiga, what are you supposed to do with the anxiety. So it's a machlokes, Reb Ami and Reb Asi. So the Gemara in Yuma says, Chad Omar Yasicheno Midaitoi. Yasicheno Midaitoi means Hesech Hadas, avert your mind from it. Forget about it. Chad Omar, the other one says, Yisechena La'acherim. Speak it out, Moloshin Sicha, conversation. Speak it out with others. So I want to talk about this because we have the tool of his baininess of thinking that we spoke about, but I want to talk about two more tools here. Reb Ami and Reb Asi. So let's talk about, we'll go in order. So the first opinion is Yasechena Midaitoi, remove it from your mind. Hesech Hadas. What does that mean? Why should you remove your mind from it? So sometimes what happens is I like to make meaning of things. The human mind likes to find meaning. And in order to find meaning, we like to tell stories. Stories are a way that we organize events and try to make them meaningful. So sometimes I'm experiencing a feeling or a sensation of distress, and I need to figure out why. And it's not a conscious process. I actually do this quite automatically. I start to make up a story to explain why I'm stressed. Oh, I know why, because I need to pay my credit cards today and I don't have the money. Yeah, but then you realize, if you're honest with yourself, that that's not why you're stressed. Because very often what you'll start to do is something called stacking. I have my credit cards to pay today. And my kid's teacher just called and said that she's going to be kicked out of class. And my schwieger told me that I didn't serve the right salad at the Shabbos meal. And my neighbor is a nudnik. And you start, I know your life. I'm telling your whole life here. Okay. These are just random theoretical examples. And you start stacking. So the reality is, you're not stressed because of these stories. You're telling yourself these stories because you're stressed. And that is why, in some cases, the Eitzah Yo'utza, the sound counsel and advice, is just stop it already. Stop convincing yourself to be stressed. Stop giving it a narrative. If you're stressed, okay, fine, so go sit down, go relax. Maybe you need to drink water. Maybe you need to take a walk. Usually we need to do both of those things. Maybe you need to cut down on screen time. Maybe you're watching too much news. That's for sure today, being exposed to news. There's no purpose in being exposed to news other than to get yourself full of scary stories that you can pick from next time your body is stressed out, and you can just use those stories to justify being stressed. So the first advice is just stop it. Stop telling yourself the stories. It's not productive. It's called rumination. Now, unfortunately, what happens is sometimes we really buy into those stories, and we make those stories like the end all and be all. And then this becomes like the organizing principle of life. And people go off and they make rash decisions and just to live out some type of, or attempt to live out some type of resolution to some type of story that wasn't even really the reason why you were stressed. You needed to drink water, take a nap, take a walk, exercise, stop looking at the news, and the stories have nothing to do with it. Just stop telling yourself stories. So that's the first advice. Get out of your head. And by the way, you know what the best way is to get out of your head? Help others. Go help somebody. Help your kids. Play with your kids with the Legos on the floor. And then help them put it away at the end. So that's the first advice. Just get out of your head and stop with the narratives. Okay, but then sometimes it's not just a narrative. Sometimes it's something that's really weighing heavily. And that's why we have the second interpretation. They're both true. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're both true. Or like my Zayda, the Megala Mukhe said, that Moshe is Rosh HaTevis Machlekes Shamei Hillel. So when you have two different opinions within Torah, this is the neurodiversity within Torah. When you have two different opinions in Torah, it's not which one is correct. They're both correct. It depends on context. So the first opinion, Chad Amar, is stop talking yourself into being more stressed. Cut out the storytelling. But then in the event that that doesn't work, meaning you're averting your mind from it, you're keeping busy with good things, and you're still feeling stressed, then maybe there really is something to it. Then maybe there's something that you need to get off your chest. And that's why it says, the second, Vichad Amar, the other opinion, Yasehena, or Yisachena, La'chedim, speak it out, Sicha, have a conversation with somebody else. And actually the Tzemach Tzedek, the Einikel of the Balatanya, says that La'chedim in this context means Achedim beguf. People who are physically Achedim, they're other than you as far as the physical body, but not emotionally, not spiritually. In other words, what the Tzemach Tzedek means is, when you're in a situation where you're going to have to do this sicha, we're going to have this conversation and talk about what's heavy on your heart, you have to pick the right person. You have to pick somebody who's going to feel your pain. Because the reality is, that's what makes it healing. That's why it works. There's a story, the Lubavitcher Rebbe told this story about the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab was the Rebbe's father-in-law's father, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad. So he was actually the younger brother. The Rebbe Rashab, Shalom Doivber, had an older brother named Reb Zalman Aaron. They called him Reza. So, and the younger brother ended up being the Rebbe. But when they were kids, they were playing, and you know, some kids play cops and robbers together, but these were Rebbe Shekinder. They were the sons of the Rebbe Maharash. So when they played Rebbe and Chassid. That was the game they played. And of course, the older brother, the Reza, told the younger brother, the Rashab, you be the Chassid, I'll be the Rebbe. So of course, the older brother always tells the younger brother what to do, which is ironic because in the end, the younger brother was the one who grew up to be a Rebbe, not the older brother. So they're playing Rebbe Chassid, and they're having a yechidus, a private audience. So the Rebbe Rashab comes in, and he's a little kid, 6 years old, and he says, Rebbe, I need a tikkun. What did you do? The older brother, the Rizal, asks him, what do you do? What do you need a tikkun for? He says, I ate nuts on Shabbos. It says in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Harav, that it's a shaila of butter with the shells. It's very cute because that was like the biggest aveda that he could think of. So he says, I ate nuts on Shabbos. So the Rizal tells him, so your tikkun is that anytime you make a bracha, you have to read it from inside the siddur. So the Rebbe Rashab, why not? That's the tikkun. That's what he made up. So the Rebbe Rashab says to his older brother, bist kein Rebbe nicht. You're not a Rebbe. And he says, what? I'm not a Rebbe? Why I'm not a Rebbe? What am I doing wrong? He says, weil Rebbe far entfert, darf geben krechts. Because a Rebbe, before he answers, he has to sigh. And when the Rebbe told that story, he said, sometimes the sigh is everything. That's all that the person needs. It's not the answer, it's the sigh. What's healing, if you follow the second Vichad Omer of Reb Ami and Reb Asi, not the Yasechena Midaitai, but rather the Yisechena La'acherim, what makes it effective, the conversation, is who you tell it to. If the person has empathy, real empathy, if they can give a krechts, then it's healing. But if you just say it to somebody, just to have said it out loud, it doesn't have that effect. Now, I want to insert here something that's a little bit off topic, but I cannot resist the opportunity to mention this because to me this is so important. If you are a parent, by the way, has anyone here in this is a big crowd, so maybe, did anyone in this crowd take my online parenting course? Oh, like 4 or 5 people. Beautiful. Okay. No, like 6, 7 people. Okay, more hands went up. All right. Baruch Hashem. Excellent. So, you answer for me. When your child needs to do this second mode, and they need to speak to an empathetic person, ideally, veterans of my course answer, who should that person be? What, lesson 4? Very good, wow. That's crazy. It is lesson 4. There's 6 weeks. That is lesson 4, yes. And what's the answer for everybody else? Who should the person be?
A wise, empathetic listener, best friend.
Yeah, who is that person? The mother, you. It's you, yes. You. You're the Rebbe. You're the one who has to give a kratz. This is so important. We think that our children need our wisdom. They do to some extent. But more than they need our wisdom, they need our empathy. And you see this more and more, not just in families, but in communities as well. Who are we looking to now for leadership? Is it just the person who knows the most, the smartest person? That's good also. Obviously, the person has to know things. But primarily, especially in this generation, we want empathetic people. We want somebody who's going to feel our pain. Someone who's going to validate our experience and not chas v'shalom, the opposite, who's going to try to talk us out of feeling what we're feeling. Now, it doesn't mean that you're feeling like this, if feelings aren't facts, right? Doesn't mean that your feeling is true, but at the same time, just because feelings aren't facts doesn't mean that feelings aren't feelings. It's a real feeling. You can validate that somebody feels a certain way. You don't have to tell them that's not how you should feel, but that's how I do feel. So yeah, if you're a parent, I would say your main job is to be that person, and that when you can provide that kind of soothing for your child, when they have pain and they have stress and worry, and they're able to talk it out with you, so first of all, that bonds them to you so tightly, and then you actually can be their mechanech, and you can actually teach them your values. But also, it sets them up for life to be strong, secure, healthy people, because they know how to work through stress. So we all need to have a compassionate person in our life. We all need to be a compassionate person in someone's life. It's extremely important. So that's another tool. Okay, so I give you 3 tools tonight. First thing, he's binding us even a minute. Now, for all, transparency, I guess I should say, if you're going to think about Hashem, you have to have what to think about, which means you're going to have to learn. So I could recommend, you can learn Shara Bitachon, we mentioned, you can learn Shara Yichud Amuna, which I mentioned. The point is to learn Pnimiyas HaTorah, something where the subject is Hashem. Not just, obviously, you have to know the halachas that you need to know in order to run a home and to live a Jewish life, and there are practical things you need to study all the time. We need to restudy those things. But I'm saying, as far as the meditation stuff, the Hizbainanus, you have to learn Pnimiyas HaTorah, where the subject is about Hashem, about Hashem's hashgacha, about the nature of reality, how Hashem creates the world every single second, about Havayahu Elokim, about how really everything is Elokus. You have to learn these subjects, and then you have what to think about. And if you'll think about those concepts, then that will be what you have an emotional attachment to. And you'll have that menuchas hanefesh and that confidence and that security to go through life with peace of mind. So that's one tool, the meditation. I give you another tool, which is kind of the opposite, which is not to think. That when you catch yourself stacking all these narratives and trying to give yourself a logical explanation for why you're stressed, instead of talking so much to yourself, stop, quiet your mind, and go do something productive. Go engage in self-care. Again, drink water, take a walk, play with your kids. So that was the second tool. And the third tool is to seek out meaningful relationships with empathetic people. That's what we call a fabrengen, by the way, when you have a group of empathetic people, people who are all in the trenches together, who are living life and applying what they're learning and trying to grow, and they can actually empathize with each other's struggles. And there's no judgment. It's a judgment-free zone. And you could speak about your failings in a vulnerable way and receive validation and chizuk. So that's another tool. There's a lot more tools. We could go on and on and on, but I think that's good for a first time. And because we advertised that there's going to be Q&A, I want to live up to that. So how are we going to do the Q&A in an orderly, quick fashion now that it's like midnight? And people's babysitters have already left their children alone. How are we going to, do I have a moderator? Could somebody help me to or am I on my own over here? Am I on my own? Okay, I'm going to try to do this quickly. Yeah, oh, you'll help me out?
I know there's the babysitter thing, so should we skip it, or do you want to give
It's up to the crowd. We could do 3-4 quick questions. We'll do 3-4 quick questions. Let's do 3 or 4 quick questions. Okay, I'll just call on people quickly. Yeah.
Out of the all those things you suggested. Versus if you spoke with all of that, and the situation doesn't change, at some point extract yourself from that situation.
Okay, I'm going to repeat it out loud. Question was, what if it's not just that you have one Lego on the floor, but the entire floor is covered in Legos, and everywhere you step, you're stepping on Legos? So do you extract yourself from that situation? Meaning, at what point do you say that this is not my nisayon? Now, obviously, what I'm going to say is general. And really, if someone's making a decision like this is a very, very important decision. But I could tell it to you like this. The decision to walk away from your nisayon even when it's really, really, really challenging, is not only as serious as divorce, it is divorce. Well, in some cases, it's literally a divorce, yeah. But in every case, it is metaphorically divorce. Because your neshama came to the world for a mission. And you are married to that mission. It's a marriage. The neshama and the guf are like a husband and a wife. We know this from Avram and Sarah, by the way, that Avram buried Sarah, and then he went and he cried over her grave. And that teaches us, the Zohar says, about how the soul goes to where the body is and grieves for it for a certain amount of time. So soul and body are like husband and wife. When your soul comes into your body, that's your marriage. Meaning your shlichus in this world, your mission that you were sent here for. And we were all sent here only for a mission. No neshama is disturbed and brought out of Gan Eden and plunged into the limitations of a body except to accomplish something, some type of birur, some type of tikkun. So it's all a shlichus, it's all a mission. That mission is a marriage of soul and body. At what point are you allowed to say, I can't take this mission? I don't mean, God forbid, someone says, I want to check out of life itself, although I understand when people have so much pain, they have such a feeling. But I'm talking about where someone says, I want to radically change my life, and I don't want to subject myself to this difficulty anymore. Maybe a career change or a geographic change, or sometimes, yeah, literally it could be marriage. But how do you know when it's time? So it's a three-way machlokes, Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva. And it's interesting because Beis Shammai is usually machmer and Beis Hillel is usually mekel. But the reason why they're machmer and mekel is because of chesed and gvura. You following? So Beis Hillel generally takes a kind approach. Beis Shammai generally takes a more tough approach. So when Beis Hillel says that you're allowed, that when Beis Shammai says that he's machmer, it's only when there's a davar erva that is grounds for divorce, and Beis Hillel is more mekel, and he says even if she burns his food. Is that chesed and gvura? That's not nice. That's not nice. It's not nice to say somebody burnt your food and then you write them off. So al pi pnimius ha'inyan, what is this describing? It's actually describing the neshama questioning whether it wants to continue a particular shlichus in this guf. So mitzad gvura, Beis Shammai will say, you can only leave your shlichus if it causes you to actually be damaged spiritually. Meaning, if it's causing you to do an aveda, then that's grounds to leave it. But nothing short of that. You don't like it, tough luck. Beis Hillel is chesed, so he'll say, even if you're not enjoying it, even if it's not geschmack, he'll write you a pass. And Rabbi Akiva says, even if you find one that you like better, which means there doesn't even have to be anything wrong with your current shlichus. You just found one that you might think is even more enjoyable. These are all legitimate approaches. That's why I said this is a very general answer. But you have to understand that in any case, even though they're all legitimate approaches, in the case where there is a divorce, So the Mizbeach cries. Mizbeach is the place of sacrifice. So why is it crying? Because instead of sacrificing, a person chose something else. Instead of embracing the hardship, they chose another option. So it's always tragic, it's always sad. But if you want to hold yourself to the strictest standard, to the Midas Hadin, the Gvura of Beis Shammai, then the rule of thumb is that if not only your shlichus is hard for you, but it's spiritually damaging you, it's actually dragging you down beruchnius, then that's considered to be a serious factor to consider. That's about as specific as I can be. Yeah.
A lot of times when I have anxiety, I feel like it's a little bit of a betrayal of action because of just all the blessings that God gives all of us, you know? And if you're spending your time being anxious, 99% of the time about things that didn't even happen yet, I just feel like it's kind of a betrayal.
Yeah. So you mentioned that when you feel anxiety, you feel it's a betrayal to Hashem. And I say that's fine if that's the way you want to feel, as with one caveat, that as long as you don't take that to heart too seriously. Because sometimes you end up feeling bad, like feeling guilty, about the fact that you feel bad. And then it brings you to an even lower level, beruchnius. So, yeah, it is, I mean, kafui toiv, to be an ingrate is a serious thing. But at the same time, don't internalize it too much, because if you start to condemn yourself, that will actually only lead to worse things. So you have to be gentle with yourself. And it's possible to say to yourself, you know, I really shouldn't be ungrateful. I really should.
Is anxiety ingratitude?
Well, it is, but what I'm saying at the same time is be gentle with yourself and say, but you know what? I'm a human being, and sometimes these are the feelings that we have, and I'm not going to condemn myself because I'm having this feeling. What I'm going to do instead is use some of the tools that we have to try to bring myself out of it. Right? So instead of, it starts a vicious cycle very often, or a person feels guilty about their ruchnistic level, and then actually the pain of the guilt causes them to indulge in worse things, which causes even worse guilt. So you have to be gentle with yourself. Like, take notice. Maybe when you're with your compassionate group of friends, you can mention it, but don't condemn yourself, because it's going to lead to worse things. Maybe this will be the last. Look, I'll do 3 and then 4. Okay, and then let's see. If these are quick, yeah. Classic question. How do you know the balance between? Yeah. How do you know you did enough ishtadlus? Okay. So here's the thing. You have to have some sense of what's normal. Hishtadlus means a normal amount of effort. Sometimes we're very deep in our own situation, so we lose our objectivity. But you can gain objectivity by thinking about, if anyone else were in this situation, what would be considered a normal amount of effort? And once you've done a normal amount of effort, you can stop. Because remember, hishtadlus does not produce anything. I just want to clarify that. You think hishtadlus does 1% and the Bitachon does 99%? It's not true. Hishtadlus does 0%. Hishtadlus produces nothing. Oh, so then why do we do it? Very simple. Because Hashem does not want open miracles. So the hishtadlus is to provide Hashem an alibi so he can hide the miracle in nature. So as long as the hishtadlus is enough that we're granting Hashem plausible deniability where he could always say, I didn't do it, it was just Teva, then that was enough ishtadlus, you're done. Okay, then, yeah. You're asking a clinical diagnosis. Right. Yeah, so, yeah, well, based on how well you know me so far, how do you think I feel about it when people say to other people, if you had more Amuna, you wouldn't have anxiety? Well, it's no good. I don't like it. Why don't I like it? It's not compassionate. First of all, don't ever say that to anybody else. That's for somebody to say to himself. Secondly, if you had more money, you wouldn't have anxiety. That's preposterous. If you had more Amuna, you'd have less anxiety. It's a spectrum. It's not either anxiety or no anxiety. It doesn't exist. You'll have less anxiety. And so even a person with an anxiety disorder, somebody who's clinically diagnosed, can and should do things to curb the anxiety. Like even somebody who's taking medication, let's say. Also, there are practices that will give a person more of a feeling of emotional grounding. And of course, they're going to do those things. And when they do them, they're going to feel better. And when they don't do those things, so then you have to go back to doing those things. So to pretend like it's all or nothing, like either it's completely a psychiatric issue or it's completely a spiritual issue, either extreme is faulty. More Amuna, more Bitachon is always going to be helpful. It's always going to make things better. In every case, it'll make things better. Does it solve everything? Of course it doesn't solve everything. But that's also, part of perfectionism, which I was talking about before, when we condemn ourselves with the black and white thinking and the extreme thinking, which sometimes, unfortunately, is very common in the religious community. And it ends up being unproductive. You have to be gentle with yourself and you'll end up serving Hashem a lot more, a lot better. Okay, last question, yeah. Oh, okay, 1 and 2, okay. Well, I'll make my answer quick, yeah.
You were saying in the beginning that everything is from Hashem, and everything is from Hashem. So how come when you see people that take matters into their own hands and reap up and take blessings, their life is better, and they wouldn't do like that if they wouldn't do it?
This is a deep question of if everything's from Hashem, but you see people take matters into their own hands and then their life gets better. Well, okay, so first of all, plenty of people took matters into their own hands and their life got worse. Let's not forget about that, okay? But secondly, like you're saying, even when you do take matters in your own hands and your life gets better, that was also from Hashem. Of course. So this is the classic philosophical paradox of Bechira and Yediyah and how can they both coexist? But at the end of the day, it's also from Hashem. Everything's from Hashem. Hashem gives you the koyach to do it. Hashem gives you the idea to do it. Hashem knows that you're going to do it. Okay, this is the last. Yeah.
Okay, so if this is like too long of a question, I have shorter.
Oh, you mean I could pick from different questions? Just pick the most exciting one. No, pick the most controversial one. Because this is the last one, so we want it to be exciting.
Okay, so what does it mean to fulfill my mission in this world? Like, that's like the main goal. And also, like, is there like a lot of missions? Are there a lot of different
Yeah. So what does it mean to fulfill my mission? Okay, so here's what I'm going to tell you. I told you that life, quality of life, is not about how you're treated. It's not about what you get, but it's about what you give. right? All right, now I'm going to tell you something. I don't just mean it's not about what you get from Olam Hazeh. I'm even including Olam Haba. Life is not about what you get. Even if you're talking about schar in Olam Haba. That's not the ultimate purpose. And I'll prove to you it's not the ultimate purpose. That neshamas in Gan Eden, who are receiving their schar in Olam Haba, eventually when Mashiach comes and there's Tchias HaMesim, they'll come back to this world. They'll leave Gan Eden. The purpose, each one of our purposes, is what we contribute to this world to make this world a holy place, to bring Mashiach. So the spiritual reward, that's a nice benefit, but it's not your purpose. Bringing Mashiach is your purpose. And each and every one of us is tied to that purpose, because in order for the world to be perfect, in order for there to be a geula klolis, each one of us has to have a geula protis. And that's really what we're doing, especially in this generation as we're getting so close to Mashiach. What's really happening is people are waking up and experiencing geula protis. So when you do your healing, it's not just personal. It's not just about you. It's not even just about your family. When you do your healing, you're actually perfecting a little piece of this world, so this world can be a place where Hashem is revealed. That is our purpose. Okay, it's been such a pleasure, and we'll have to do it again sometime. Thank you.